Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ChMC Masterclass digital event. My name is Natasha and I'm an events coordinator at the CMI, and I'll shortly be handing over to David to begin today's event. If you have any questions during the digital event, you can ask them using the chat box to the right of your screen, and we shall answer as many as we can during the Q&A. Today's session is being recorded and will be shared with you later today for those who book to attend. The event recording will also be available on the CMI website and the CMI YouTube channel. Now over to David, ChMC Assessment Manager at CMI, to begin this event.
Thanks, Natasha, and good morning, everybody, wherever you are. I hope you're having a nice day so far today. What we're going to talk about today is two parts of this. I want to give you a little bit of background to the Chartered Management Consultant status, and then I'm going to take you through the assessment process and show you what good evidence and what not so good evidence looks like, so we can get a much better idea of what we're expecting from you when you enter a submission. So I guess the first question really is why Chartered Management Consultant? Why did we come up with this, and how did this arise? Well, it's all about consistency, and there were a number of challenges within the management consultant environment about harmonizing the professional standards. What does good look like? What do we mean when we say this person has achieved a professional standard? And what does that include? So we wanted it to include things like ethical behavior, best practice, consistency. It was a way of enabling clients to differentiate, if you like, between different management consultants. And so when they're engaging with a management consultant, it's not just about price. It's about the whole everything that goes into that buying decision. So there's price, there's value, there's quality, consistency, how you've made a difference, not your firm, but how you've made a difference as an individual consultant. But from a firm's point of view as well, it was also about attracting and retaining the best talent possible. So if I'm a firm, I can say, I only want to employ people who've got this status, or we want to make sure that everybody in our firm who should have this status has achieved this status. And it's about demonstrating that not only in the industry, but to other competitors as well as clients. And it's also about building a sustainable and interactive community. So as management consultant professionals, we can all talk to each other in the same language. We understand how we've achieved that status. We understand what each of us has been through in order to do that. And we understand what we're demonstrating to the rest of the world by holding this status. So it's a really good way of showing a quality kite mark, if you like. Now, one of the things that people often say is, how did you come about this? Did you just sit there in your offices at CMI and think this was a good idea? And that's not how it came about at all. We developed this in conjunction with the MCA. We developed this in conjunction with a number of firms as well involved in the pilot phase of this. A number of well-known firms that I won't name, but a number of high-level well-known firms have been involved in the development of this and continue to be involved in this as we develop it further and further. And one of the things that we're looking at the moment is an interim status as well, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail as we go through this. On the back of all that, CMI were appointed by the Privy Council to be the awarding body, and we are the only people that can award you the ChMC status. This is not a qualification that's open to everybody. This is a professional status that recognises your professional ability. It is being recognised across the board. It's being recognised now by Cabinet Office as well. And as we move forward, anybody who deals with the government will probably be asked to show how they've got this status and how many of their staff have got this status. And as such, the Government Office sit on the oversight board for ChMC as well. ChMC is all about adding value. It's about aligning to that real life industry competency-based framework. This is, as I say, this isn't a qualification. This is real work. This is what I've really done in a real workplace with real clients, how I've really made a difference. So it really gives you an opportunity to sit back and say, how did I get where I am today? How has my real experience, my hands-on practice, gotten me from that junior consultant when I first started to where I am today in a position where I feel comfortable and confident that I can go for ChMC and be awarded the status. And that's really, really valuable, because in our busy, always on lives these days, how often do we get the opportunity to sit back and go, yeah, do you know what? I'm really good, and I'm good because of this, this, and this. And I will stand up and I will stand behind that and say, this is what I do, this is why I do it, this is how I do it, and this is the difference all that makes. Because we're rushing from job to job to job, often we don't get that opportunity. So part of going through this process is a real opportunity to do just that. And a lot of people that have been through this will echo that and say, this was one of the things that came out of it for me. It links to other professional statuses, but having other professional statuses won't often by themselves get you ChMC. So it links to Chartered Manager in that it's also a status that's awarded by the Privy Council through CMI to deliver Chartered Manager. It links to the Certified Management Consultant status, but again, that won't get you ChMC often by itself. And it also links to membership of MCA, CMI, and IC. But again, those statuses won't get you the ChMC status. It is a professional, real-world, hands-on, actual experience status. So having those other statuses will give you a bit of a head start in a sense, but you still have to go through the whole assessment process. You still have to demonstrate how you meet the criteria, and you still have to go through the professional discussion, which we'll talk about as we go through this. So there is no backdoor into this. We're not grandfathering people into this because of their many, many years of experience or their hierarchy in a firm. Everybody who achieves this status goes through in exactly the same way. Now, there are a number of routes to getting ChMC. The main two really are what we call the on-program route. And this is where you'll be on a firm's in-house training program. And you'll have been operating as a management consultant within that training program for at least 5 years. And at that point, if everybody in your firm thinks you're ready, your mentors and your managers think you're ready, you can go for this process through that route. The second way to get to ChMC is what we call the experienced professional route. That's where you've got at least 7 years acting as a management consultant. Now, I just want to stress here, because I think it's really important, it's acting or working as a management consultant, not a manager, not a project manager, not a PMO, not a leader or director that's working in another sphere. Even if you're in a management consultant firm, you have to have that experience of operating as a management consultant. Now, a lot of people will say to me, well, I'm an internal management consultant. I only work for one firm. I don't deal with clients. Everything I do is in one firm. We come across this in certain areas of the public sector, namely the NHS, for example, the military, and some councils. If you're operating in those environments or a similar environment as an internal management consultant, you can still go for this status as long as you're covering the criteria. If you're just being parachuted in and taken out after a problem is solved, that's not covering the whole criteria. So you need to look at the criteria. If you're in that position, say, do I meet these criteria? If you do, that's not a barrier. You don't have to be working for a consultancy firm as such. Equally, if you're a sole trader, you work for yourself as an individual, as a consultant, have a look at it. If you can meet the criteria, you can demonstrate the whole breadth of that, then go for it. That's not going to be a barrier to this. Just check in with that, ask yourself the questions, do I meet these criteria? So a number of routes there. If you have an extended diploma or a professional qualification at level 7 in consulting, that will get you to the point where you can also go for the ChMC status. But again, it's not going to bypass it. You still have to go through the whole assessment process. So there are no back doors, as I say, no hierarchy getting you in this. Everybody goes through the same process. We just get to it in different routes. Those 3 routes we talked about. We're also bringing in a new status very shortly at applied level. And this is for those people that are on the journey. And it's a way of saying, I'm on the journey. I've done at least 3 years. I want some recognition for that. I want some accreditation for that to prove that I'm going in the right way. I'm demonstrating what I should do at that level. And then I'm moving on. And ultimately, I will be going for the chartered status as well. So there's a new status coming in very shortly for those people who want to show their professional ability, but haven't got the 5 years experience. So that is something to look out for as well if you're in that position. So we talked about all that. We know the routes there. We know what's involved. Let's have a look at assessment, the bit you're probably here for, and show you how that works in real life. And then we're going to be joined later on today by one of our assessors who's going to talk about what they look for in terms of assessment as well. So let's have a look at all that. So the assessment journey is number of stages on this, really. You have to make sure that you're ready to go for the assessment journey. And once you've submitted your application, you have 90 days to submit your submission, which is in the form of a written submission to start with. Now, if you're working in a firm, you need to check with your coordinator in the firm to make sure that you're ready. If you're not working in a firm, you need to check with your manager or your mentor and check that you're ready. Get somebody else to have a look at your submission before you start this process, because once you start, the clock is running and you need to meet certain deadlines. Your submission will be reviewed by one of our experts. And as I say, we've got one of our expert assessors with us today to talk about this. If your written submission is successful, you will go on to a professional discussion, which is not an interrogation. It's not an interview. It is a professional discussion carried out virtually with one of, with one of our assessors, who are all consultants and have all been through this process. Your evidence is then checked and corroborated by your nominated sponsor, and you do have to have a sponsor. Now, if you don't work for a firm, you can have a sponsor who's a professional peer, a professional colleague. You don't have to be employed to do this. That isn't a bar to taking part in this. Once you've been through that process, all applications are moderated. So one of my moderating team will have a look at it and make sure that you've been treated fairly and consistently along with everybody else who's gone through the process. That you haven't been misjudged or anything like that. So that happens in the background as well. And after all that process has gone through, you'll be notified of the outcome. Now, this is a pass or fail, so you can fail. This isn't a return for further development. This isn't a qualification where we just keep asking you for more. This is a professional status, rather like a driving test. You know, you go for your driving test and you pass or you fail. And just like the driving test, if you do happen to fail, we're not saying you can't do this. What we're saying is, for the time that we were with you, you didn't demonstrate what we needed you to demonstrate. Just like your driving test, you know, you can be the best driver, you drive with your mum, your dad, your friends, whatever it might be, and everybody says, yeah, you're a really good driver, you should go for your test. And on the test, you just have a terrible day. You have a mare of a day and it all goes a bit wrong and you fail. Doesn't mean you're a bad driver, it means you didn't pass the test on that day. And that's what we're looking at as well here. So for the hour or so that you're with us is what we're judging you on. If you are unlucky enough to fail, it doesn't mean anything that you didn't demonstrate on that day what we required you to demonstrate. But when you are successful, and we hope you are successful, you'll be able to use the post-nominal letters that demonstrate to everybody that you've achieved that status. What are we judging you against? Well, we're not just making this up. We're judging you against a competency framework that's been agreed with the MCA and with all the firms that were involved at the beginning of this pilot. And we're assessing a number of things here. First of all, we're assessing your values, ethics, and behaviors. And it's really important to remember this is your values, ethics, and behaviors, not the values of the firm that you work for or the organization that you're part of. How are you demonstrating that you meet those values, ethics, and behaviors? How are you demonstrating when you're challenged in an ethical situation that you're dealing with that appropriately? Then we look at your leadership and management skills and how you use those working in the field. We look at your operating environment, how you deal with clients, how you deliver for clients, how you're consistent, how you meet clients' needs, but still do that in the basis of the contract that you're in as well. And then really importantly, we look at your CPD, your professional and personal development. And what we want to see is that how did you get to here and how are you going to maintain your position at the top of the tree? You've achieved this status. It's not just a one-off. How are you going to maintain that? And we will check on every 12 months to look at how you're developing, how you're meeting the current requirements that you said you were going to do. If you haven't, what's got in the way? What are you going to do instead? How are you going to continue to grow and develop and be the best that you can be in terms of being a professional management consultant? Before we start looking at evidence, there are a number of things that I would recommend you look at, and these are just two of the tools, but find a tool that works for you in terms of collecting evidence. My favorite one is 6 Serving Men. I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. The names are what and why and when and how and where and who. Now, I use this in general life as well as in putting something together, either a report or an assessment or wherever it might be. But I think if you can say, what are you doing? What did you do? Why did you do it? Where did you do it? How did you do it? What difference did it make? Who did you do it for? Where did it happen? Who was affected? All those kinds of things. If you can think about those things, your submission will be better for it. So that's one tool I like to use. And lots of other people use the STAR technique, of course. This was the situation, this was the task, this was the action that I took, and this was what happened as a result. And if you can think about those tools or other tools, whatever works best for you, when you're compiling your written submission and when you're facing your professional discussion, you'll have a much better submission. There are word limits on the written submission. We make no bones about that. There are no excuses for that. This is real life stuff. If you were submitting a pitch, you'd need to do that in a certain way, or it wouldn't get looked at. Just like this, we're looking for it to be within a word limit. So think about what you're going to say. Think about the what, why, when. Get it concise. Get it in there. Think about your ABC of communication. Make it accurate, brief, and concise. And check that it makes sense to somebody who isn't you. Because we think we see what we think we've written, and often it's really good to get somebody else to look at it and go, this is full of jargon. This doesn't make any sense. I don't know what you're trying to say. And that gives you an opportunity to revisit it, tidy it up, make it make sense. Make it easy for your assessor to say, yeah, this makes sense. Let's go on to the professional discussion. If somebody other than you reads it and can't make sense of it, the likelihood is our assessor isn't going to make sense of it either. When we're assessing your evidence, we use a program called VAX. So we make sure that it's valid. It's evidence that relates to the competencies. We're not looking for fluff and filler and added weight here. As I say, you've got a tight word limit. Make sure that everything you put in there is adding to the evidence and demonstrating how good you are. It needs to be authentic. So it needs to be about you. It needs to relate to you and your performance. We don't want stuff in there that says, the team did this, the firm did that. If you're part of a team, what did you do? What was your role that you played within that team? Think about that. I'm not assessing your team, I'm not assessing your organization. We're assessing you. So I want to know, I was part of a team and I did this. That's good evidence. It needs to be current, which means that it's relating to knowledge and skills that you're using and demonstrate now. Now, as an example of this, my first degree was in IT, but I graduated at the end of the last century. I love saying that. It's mad, isn't it? But I graduated at the end of the last century in IT, and I haven't really done a great deal with it since. Obviously, I use IT every day. But if I were to say I'm still a programmer, then it wouldn't really be current. It's valid. I can say that because I have the qualification, but it isn't current because I don't use it. So think about that. If you're referring to stuff that you've used a long time ago, are you still able to do that? Are you still demonstrating that? And the last one is sufficiency. Is there enough evidence for the assessor to make a decision? Because if there isn't, you'll get it back. Now, if you get it back, that's not the end of the world. You get 2 chances to do this, your initial submission and 1 referral if we need more evidence. The problem for you is if we need more evidence, the word count reduces again. So make sure that you're absolutely ready. You've checked, it meets the criteria. It's valid, authentic, current, and sufficient. And somebody can look at it and go, yep, absolutely see what you're saying, absolutely see the difference you've made. Let's go on and have a professional discussion. Think about all those things before you do. So we've talked about the written submission. It's all done on one template. If you're coming through a on-program route that I mentioned earlier, there's more to fill in. If you're coming through the experienced professional level, so you've got that 7 years experience, then you can come through, you don't have to fill quite so much in on the template. So a bit of a bonus there. So there's the written submission, the professional discussion, and then every 12 months we will come to you and say, tell us what you've done in terms of CPD, that development you said you were going to do to stay at the top of your tree. And how are you now? So a few things to think about here. When you're putting in the written submission, the first question I would ask myself is, why should I be given ChMC status? What is it about me that means I stand head and shoulders above everybody else? Now, for some of us that have grown up in the West, that's really, really difficult to do, because we're continually told it's not about you, it's about we. It's not about you, it's about us. We're a team, we're a firm, we're an organization. This is the challenge for a lot of people, because this is about you. And we want to know what difference you've made. How have you made a difference? Where was that difference measured? When did you make that difference? Who did you make that difference for? And who agrees that you made that difference? We can all say, oh yeah, I was brilliant and I did this. But how do we prove that? That's easy to say, isn't it? This is not CVs we're looking for here. We're looking for real world experience and demonstrating the evidence against the criteria. And it's all about you. Now, some people find this really difficult, unsurprisingly, but this is the challenge that you're faced with. And that challenge carries through to the professional discussion as well, when you'll be asked to talk about you. So be prepared to do that. People often say, when should I start collecting evidence for this? And I would say straight away. Make yourself an electronic shoebox. In the old days, you put everything in a shoebox and stick it under the bed or whatever, get it out when you needed it, pull out all your receipts, keep the tax man happy, do your expenses, get audited, whatever it might be. So what I say to people is, anything that you think is going to be used as evidence, collect it now. Collect as much of it as you can, but don't submit all of it, because we want you to select the best evidence that meets the criteria. Make sure that the evidence you put in is connected to the criteria, joins up those dots, make sure that it's there for a reason, and then reflect on it and make sure that it demonstrates the best of you. And make sure that everything that you submit is in one form and it meets the word count limits. You cannot submit anything outside the template we asked you to fill in. If you do, it just won't get looked at. You'll be wasting your time. You may have missed something in your template. And if you try and do it in an external document, we won't even look at it, because the rules say everything has to be within the template. So think about that. It is a challenge. I'm not going to make any bones about it. Getting that down within the word limit is really challenging for a lot of us, but it is the challenge that we take on. This is a route we've chosen, and we go down that route. We have to meet the requirements of that. So when we're submitting evidence, just have a quick look at what evidence should look like and what weak evidence looks like and good evidence looks like. And I say here that weak evidence lacks interest, and it really is the so what question. If you have evidence like, the consulting operating environment is complex and learning new ways of working allows my team to deliver better outcomes. Well, so what? That's life, that's management, that's part of what we all do as a job. At a leadership and management level, this translates to providing stretch opportunities and bringing the best out of people by creating a safe space to work for them. Yeah, that's what we expect you to do. But that's not specific to you. That's what everybody doing your job is supposed to do. That's what everybody managing people is supposed to do. How is that telling me anything about you? How is that engaging my interest? There's a whole load of words in there that are quite wasted. So think about the evidence. Is it giving the best of you? Now, some examples of what might be better evidence. And this is really, don't forget, when we're doing this sort of thing, we're telling a story. We're telling a story of you, telling the story of how you do what you do, and in real specifics. So I needed to set an example to the diverse team in my behaviors in order to ensure they were high performing a collaborative team. I was the spearhead in leading and managing the client through the change. So it's telling me about, I was doing this. What did you do? It might be part of a team, but what was your role in that team? How did you make a difference? I have consistently delivered exceptional work, both in client-facing programs and internal development projects. Now, you could say that's what you expected to do. Great. Yes, you're right. That's what you expected to do. But then this particular example, we've gone on to say, my current role sees me leading a project. So there's a little bit of background there, and this is what I'm doing now. And we've got numbers in there to show the difference that I've actually made. Now, don't fall into the trap. This is CV. We're not just bigging this up. You need to be able to back this up, and you need to be able to link it to the criteria as well. So think about all of those things. So some key points about your written submission. It's a chance for you to demonstrate how good you really are and why you make a difference. It's your story. It's not your team's story, not your firm's story. It's about you. And why should we give you this status? Before you submit it, make sure that somebody else reads it and make sure that they understand what you're saying. And remember, we're not looking for fluff and filler. We're looking for quality evidence here. And you can think about this as your ticket to the dance or getting to the next stage. And the next stage is the professional discussion. Now, I mentioned referrals earlier, and you get two chances with the written submission. So you get one original and one potential referral. Now, if you get a referral, don't think it's the end of the world. It is your opportunity to polish what you've already put in. It's your opportunity to build on that. There might be gaps in that. There might be bits that are missing or not clear, and your assessor will highlight those for you. I won't tell you how to do them, but just say there's no evidence here or this evidence is weak, and then you will be expected to produce more evidence. Now, you get 14 days to do that. It's time limited. Make no excuses for that. That's to keep you on track and keep you going through the process. But you get 14 days to do that. You get resubmission, and hopefully at that stage, we get to the professional discussion. The professional discussion is face-to-face, but it happens virtually on medium like this. It lasts around about an hour. It will last at least 50 minutes, but it can go on for an hour and 15, hour and 20. Now, if it finishes early or it goes on to an hour and 15, that means nothing except that we've either got everything we need or we're asking you for a bit more. Don't make any judgments on yourself on how long the professional discussion lasts. We're all human, and sometimes you can just be talking about something really interesting and we want to hear a bit more about it. The purpose of the professional discussion is to validate the evidence that you've submitted. We can all write a good story, but can you walk the walk as well? Can you build on that and demonstrate how you've made those differences, where you've made them and what you've actually done? We will have a discussion about ethics and we will have a discussion about CPD. So be prepared for those elements to come up when you're in your professional discussion. There are no trick questions here. It's not an interrogation and it's not a Q&A. It isn't a test as such, but you can fail. And we have people fail at this stage and we have people fail at the written submission stage. Now, the main reason people fail at the professional discussion stage is they don't turn up. They turn up physically, but their mind is somewhere else. You're thinking about something else. You're thinking about that email you've got to write, that meeting you've got to get to. They've not left enough time. We've had examples where people have said, I've got to go. Well, and we were like, well, hold on a minute, we haven't got everything there, but I've got to go. Make sure you leave enough time to do this. We say around about an hour, but I would put 2 hours in your diary. Block out 2 hours. You don't want to be in the middle of a professional discussion thinking, come on, hurry up, I've got to get to my next meeting. That's not going to be successful if you end up in that position. So think about all those things. Turn up physically, turn up mentally, make sure you leave enough time. Take this as the most important thing you're going to do for that 2 hours. Treat us as you would one of your important clients. Be a consultant in that professional discussion. Think about it. It's all about you, all about the difference you make, all about what you've done, not your firm, not your team, but you. And we really want you to succeed. We're not going to waste your time. We're not going to pose you with trick questions. There'll be nothing in there that you shouldn't be able to cover off. Nothing we discuss should be a real surprise to you. Think about what you've done in your written submission. Think about referring back to that. Think about the criteria. And you'll be fine. You'll get through this. Make friends with that criteria. Make friends with that framework. Be all over that. Be prepared to deal with any discussion that comes up around that criteria. We're not looking for fluff. We're not looking for filler. We're not looking for the so what. This is part of my job. Yeah, but so what? What difference does it make to clients? Why am I paying your charge out rate when I could get one of my managers to do that? Think about those things. How are you making that difference? Remember what you put in your written submission. Remember what you told us. Be prepared to back that up. What else do we need to know? What else do you want to tell us to build on what you've put in your written submission? Have a practice, but don't practice too much because you'll take the edge off it. And then think about, how am I? How am I today in order to do this? Am I in the right place? What's gone on? Have I driven backed out of the drive and run over the cat? Have I had an argument? What's going on? Am I in the best place I can be to do this today? Or do I need to get in touch with my assessor and say, this is not going to work if we do this today? Is there a possibility that we can make some changes. So think about all those things. We want the best of you on the day. And really, 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 the best thing I can do is to say, treat this as a real pitch, but you're the engagement. You're the one we want. You're what we need to know. You're the one we want to hear about. How have you done this? Where have you done it? All those things that I've talked about this morning. Be prepared to come to this and you'll be as successful as you possibly can be. So that's the end of the presentation for me. And I'm really, really pleased to be joined this morning by one of our assessors, Simon Oaken. And Simon is joining us today. Simon has been through the process. Simon is a management consultant, and Simon is one of our assessor team. So morning, Simon. Really pleased to have you with us.
Morning, David.
Perhaps for our audience this morning, you could just give us a brief history of your background.
Yeah, sure. So like most of you, when you go to through the final part of your education, I wasn't quite clear what I wanted to do. Ended up doing a degree in hotel and catering management. I like dealing with people and I like food. So that was quite a good thing for me. But coming at the end of that, I realized that perhaps if you didn't own your own business, it wasn't the best of industries. You work really, really hard for very little money. And a good friend of mine was in IT in a large corporate, that was 3M, and said some opportunities, would you like to start? So I started right at the very basics when mainframes were around and saw the PC come into being and then the network happen. And really from that developed my skills into what started as technical consultancy and very soon became organizational consultancy, organizational change consultancy related to IT, and then really built on that. That sort of culminated in me running my own business, my own consulting organization for a while. One of the final roles I got with that was to do acquisitions for a large American organization. And that ended up me joining that organization and going through a number of different focused acquisitions during that course, one of which was working for GE, which was quite an eye-opener at the time when Jack Welch was running it. So a lot of my foundation in management, a lot of my foundation in getting to the top of management and leading organizations was built along that path. So quite a long path. And the last 10 years of my career culminated in me designing and building a global managed services organization from scratch to service very large global corporates, which was quite challenging, as you can imagine. So effectively, when I look back, I've been on both sides, the client side and effectively the management consultancy side. And I think that for me has developed a portfolio of experience that helps me a lot when it comes to assessing a variety of skills and experiences through the assessment process.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. I think that's really useful for people to understand where our assessors are coming from and that it is real experience, real world experience. When we get into the assessing process, I think it's really useful for people to understand what are you looking for from an application and a written submission. When you first get that written submission, what kind of things are you looking for?
It sort of, I guess, seems obvious in one perspective. You've really been through the slides over the last half an hour, and in that you highlighted the competency framework. The reality of the written submission, for me, is a very organized story, if you like, of how you have demonstrated and how you do demonstrate at chartered level. And I think that's the key for me. Yeah. All of the competencies as you've gone through your journey and your career. Now, sometimes the only way you can do that is really to start and then reflect and then review against the competency framework and just check you've ticked the boxes. So for me, I mean, there's some obvious things. Is that, did you tick all the boxes at the right level? Sometimes it's not always possible. And you don't have to tick absolutely all of them. If there's some that are slightly weaker, maybe we'll explore those later in the PD. But the majority you should be able to demonstrate at a chartered level and refer back to the chartered competency framework and check you are showing that during the whole submission. Check your word count. I mean, it's really boring for me when I have to bounce people because the word count's wrong. It is a finite word count, and so we are expected to review that as we go through. And also, I think that the other thing, not to be, put the effort in, put the review in, but if you are missing some, then you may well get referred. And then the referral gives you the chance to look back at that section and say, okay, well, where could I have demonstrated the values better? And David touched on it earlier. It is the demonstration of you personally demonstrating those values, not something your team did, but something you led, something that your value to the client. And I can't emphasize that enough. What is your value to the client? What is your experience and expertise versus the client expertise? You've done this for a number of different clients. So that collective expertise is really valuable to individual clients. So how do you stay up to date? How do you stay up to date with the market? How do you stay up to date with what your clients are needing? And how do you further yourself to really deal with that, to really furnish clients with very good management consultancy and advice on the back of that? And that's at a leadership level. And I think that's quite important to understand. Yes, you need a good awareness of things like technology. You need an awareness of processes and method, because that's very important. But it's about the general knowledge of the client's marketplace and what you have in your arsenal that can speed them on their journey and where you've evidenced that. And I think that's key for me.
I think that's brilliant advice. And I think one of the things I wanted to pick up on there, you mentioned that make sure that it refers to the criteria at the chartered status. And I think that's really important, isn't it? Because we're seeing the occasional submission where people are meeting the criteria, but not at the chartered status. They're meeting it at that associate status, even though they've got 5 years experience. And I think sometimes people aren't going to get the opportunity to do that. And for me, it's about just reflecting and saying, I've not had the opportunity to do that. So in terms of my own development, I'm going to go away, engage with that, and then come back when I'm ready to submit to the process. When we're seeing written submissions come through, what are you seeing as the most challenging things that people are finding in the written submission? And I guess on the back of that, what would you say is the biggest cause of failure at that level, at that, before you even get to the professional discussion?
So I think there's two things there. One is more about how the logical flow of your written submission against the template, because the harder it is for me to try and find evidence, the more it doesn't, if it doesn't flow, it makes it really difficult to do.
Yeah.
So make it obvious that these are the competencies you are demonstrating, and how you have demonstrated that. And where I guess there's two things. There's the referrals, which I think should help. As David said earlier, it's not a massive problem. It's just saying, come on, guys, you're a bit weak in this area. Can you bolster this up? Can you review that area and bolster it up? So when it does get to a failure at the written submission level, it will have been through that process, and you then have not bolstered it up in a way that puts you fairly and squarely at chartered level for those competency areas that were marked as weak. And I think that for me is probably the biggest area where you're going to get failures, because you get a second chance. Yeah. Unlike other exams where you don't get a second chance, you do get a second chance on the written one. And I think it's just getting that evidence right. Spend time on it.
Yeah.
And I think if you do reflect on it, if you do review it, if you do refine it, consistently checking against word count. Sorry, guys, but it is important. Otherwise, it's not fair, if you put it that way. Somebody uses twice as many words as somebody else. But if you do that, then you should stand a really good chance of getting through to the professional discussion phase.
And I think that ties back to what we were saying about, treat it as a professional pitch, doesn't it? Both in terms of the word count. If we're saying you have to stay within the word count, and you're quite right. If somebody doubles that, it's not fair. If I'd have had twice as many words, I could have got a better submission or a better pitch. But I think it is about that real world thing. If your client is looking for X, Y, and Z, and you give them A, B, C, you're probably not going to go further than that in the process. And that's all we're asking for, isn't it? Anybody who gets this status, we are very happy to stand up and say, this person has this status. They will act in this way. They will deliver consistency. They will deliver quality. And they've proven all that by going through this process. And how do we say that if people aren't doing that? There are no bypasses into this, as I keep saying. And I make no bones personally about the word count, because I do think it's really important that everybody has had the same opportunity. Everybody has been constrained in the same way to meet those same challenges. And I think that's really important. When you get through that, if, with or without a referral, you get through to the professional discussion. What are you seeing as the biggest challenges in the professional discussion? And I guess on the back of that, again, why are people failing at professional discussion from your point of view as an assessor?
So the way I run professional discussions, and I think it is a discussion, and I do make that clear at the beginning. I do add things from my past in order to help the journey. What a PD is really is trying to do several things. One, assess that the individual is operating at that level when he's discussing with you, or she's discussing their career with you. But secondly, it's a journey of discovery to really support areas that were potentially slightly weak in the written submission. And during that journey, hopefully people will pick up on the leads that say, well, this is an area we're going to talk about in a little more depth. And they can bring examples to the discussion of where they have done this, where they have shown this, where they have demonstrated it beyond any debate. And that's positive. And I think where people fail on the PD is where they really struggle. I guess some might be nervous. They shouldn't be nervous because it's just two guys and girls chatting. So that's what it is. So don't feel nervous about it. Be yourself. And that's easy to say, maybe difficult to do. But draw on your past. And in the PD, you can draw on your entire past. It's not limited to your submission. So examples of specific areas that we talk about in more depth may be easier for you to cover because you're going to discuss it rather than looking back necessarily to your submission. You can look back to your submission. That's not an issue. So do reread your submission before the PD. But equally, think about your entire career. Think about when we're having a discussion about X, Y, Z. Well, actually, I did that 10 years ago, 11 years ago. I didn't put it in the PD, but I'll bring it as an example because that will help my case. The failures happen when people struggle to still manage to draw examples of that competency operating at that level and delivering that value to their client base.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think we've probably got some questions from the audience, but just before we go to those, if there was one piece of advice that you would give about the assessment process, what would that be?
Allow enough time for it. It sounds really simple, but when I talk to a lot of the candidates going through this at the end, and we have a quick chat, they talk about this period of time as being quite cathartic in terms of their look back in their career, and they're just thinking about, what value did it bring? What did I do? What did I learn? So you can't do that overnight. So maybe it's an iterative process. You don't try and do it all at once and then go back and then go back and then go back and reflect. But do allow enough time for it, because being concise against the word count for your entire career and all of your experience is not easy.
It's not.
And just making sure you surface the right things, the most appropriate things, the most, best examples of where you can demonstrate that you have and are operating at the right levels, I think is critical. So time and reflection are probably the biggest things I could say about this. Brilliant.
Thank you. I think we've got some questions probably for both of us from the audience.
Yes, we do. Very active audience today, which is what we like to see. So we have a question from Kishan, and apologies if you can't answer this one. It says, does a level 7 postgraduate extended diploma in business management count as a level 7 postgrad diploma?
It depends who you talk to. That's not meant to be a flippant answer. Sorry about that, Kishan. I would say yes, but it would depend. The postgraduate bit, really depends on whether you're a graduate in the first place, I guess. Otherwise, it's, you could just say, well, it's an extended level 7 diploma. It's the same thing. It's just nomenclature and terminology about whether it's graduate. But my personal opinion would be yes, but I wouldn't take that as a definitive answer. And that's not really something we could deal with this morning. Perhaps somebody else at CMI would be better placed to answer that question.
Thank you, David. I wasn't sure about that one. I thought it's always best to ask just in case.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So here's one you will definitely, hopefully, be able to answer. It's from AJ, and they've said, looking at the templates, it asks for testimonials, asking for 3 or 4 in each section with 10 sections. So is it right to assume that you're looking for 3 or 4 testimonials across the submission rather than per section?
Simon, you comfortable to pick up on this one as a person who's going to be looking at this?
Yeah, I think there's a balance between how many testimonials. I'm thinking this might be more applied than experience route, because the applied is very weighted on testimonials. It's 3 to 4 in each section in the applied learning route. So in experience, testimonials are useful, but your word count is severely restricted. So if it absolutely nails it on the head, then have them in the experience route template. But absolutely in the applied learning, yes, 3 to 4 for each section.
That's great. Thank you. Nice, easy answer for that one. So here is another one which hopefully you can answer. So are technical consultants that work client side to design solutions for those clients within scope of CMI?
Providing they meet the criteria, yes. Being a technical specialist, being funneled down into one specific area isn't a barrier to going for this. I mean, if I think about my own career as a consultant, over the years I've funneled down to focusing largely on people and change, but I still get involved with the other areas of the process as well. So I'm still talking to clients, I'm still pitching, or I was when I had my own business. So I'm still covering those criteria, but my area of expertise is really about people and change. So being in that kind of space, to answer your question, Stuart, it's not going to be a barrier as long as you can demonstrate how you meet the other criteria around it.
Yeah, I think if I looked at that from my perspective, I've seen some submissions where some organizations call their technical architects technical consultants. And at that level, it is about consultancy. It is about management and consulting rather than technical architecture from a purely technology perspective. If it's related to business change, constructing organizations and making organizations more efficient and better and implementing end to end, then that's different. But if it's pure architecture, then that doesn't really live here.
I think one simple question you can ask yourself is, if somebody said, what do you do? If your first thought is I'm a technician, or your first thought is project manager, then this isn't for you. If your first thought isn't I'm a management consultant dealing with X, then I would think again.
Yep.
That's great. Thank you. So what benefit would you say ChMC holds versus years of experience in consulting?
That's a really good question. And for me, it's not one versus the other. ChMC is a professional recognition of your years of experience. And as we move forward with this, we've got in excess of 500 people have successfully been through this process now. As it rolls on, it's going to become more and more the kite mark for quality. And so it's not one versus the other. It is as I say, it's a professional recognition of your years of experience.
And I think if you compared it to the financial consulting the financial business, there have been a number of accreditations for many years that you need to get, as opposed to it is a recognition of your status. From a finance perspective, there's been nothing for management consulting. No. So again, when I'm talking to people going through the process, especially for some people in some of the smaller firms, it gives them a level playing field. It gives them a recognition. All the hard work, all the experience they put in has now gone and been reflected on through this process, and they've come out with an award for them as a person that says, this is a recognition of what I have achieved. And it's a universal recognition rather than somebody's experience of A and somebody's experience of B. And I think for me that's really important about this whole accreditation.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. So we do have a couple of questions left, but if you do want to take advantage of having David and Simon here to answer your questions, please do leave them in the live chat, and we shall hopefully get to them before the end of the session. So does experience as an internal consultant impact eligibility?
No, it doesn't. I mean, it's not going to stop you. As I mentioned earlier, we've got people coming through from the NHS, from local government, from government, civil service, military, all those kinds of things, where you're not being charged out at a day rate. You're internal, but you're part of an internal consulting arm that only works with internal clients. The key factor, again, is if you're meeting the criteria. If you can demonstrate how you meet the 54 criteria, then that's not going to be a barrier. The only time it would be a barrier is if you're called a consultant, but you're actually acting as a project manager. So you're being parachuted in to solve a particular problem and then taken out, for example. If you're part of the end-to-end process, then that won't be a problem.
And how long would you say the accreditation process takes?
How long's a piece of string, as they say. Once you say you're ready, the clock starts running and you have 90 days in which to get your submission in. Then there's a period of 48 hours for an assessor to contact you and say they've picked up your submission and they'll be going to contact you. Then there's 5 days after that for them to do their first trawl through. Then the clock kind of stops, and it's between you and the assessor to arrange for the professional discussion, and that can be as long as it takes. Sometimes it's a couple of days, sometimes it's 2 or 3 weeks. I wouldn't personally leave it any longer than that, because everybody has to go back and refresh what they're doing, and we all lose track because that's how humans work and other things get in the way. And then we get 15 days to give you your response, so it can go through a period of reflection, a period of moderation before you get your result one way or the other. So that's the time frame around it. So I guess you could say from start to finish about 4 months, but most people, when they submit, they want to get on with it quite quickly. So we have examples of people submitting a written submission, everything being checked and everything being done in 3 weeks, and they've got their result. So it really is how long is a piece of string. But don't say you're ready. Don't let your firm say you're ready. So you go on from the waiting process to the readiness process until you are ready, because you don't want that 90-day clock running with you thinking, oh my Lord, I've got to find 5 days to sit and do this, or when am I going to get a weekend in which to get this done? How can I do this properly? Picking up on what Simon said earlier about give yourself time to do it once that clock is running. You want to do all that before you hit that I'm ready, and then you can get your submission in straight away.
That's great. And one final question from me is, if you could give someone who started the process one piece of advice, what would you give them?
Focus. But for me, it would be focus. Book time in your diary, book time out of other things in order to get this finished and done, and treat it seriously. This isn't an add-on. This isn't something that we're just going to give you because you've been doing the job for 30 years and you're in a senior position. Think about taking it very, very seriously and make time. Simon, what would you say?
I think that clearly, but I think the other thing, which again sounds pretty obvious, is pick up the competency framework when you've finished your submission and go through it and tick every one and just check whether you think you've covered them all at the right level just before you hit that button. And I think that final review is probably the most important, and probably the key between getting through from the first written submission through to professional discussion without having to redo anything.
RTFQ, as my teachers used to say. Read the question.
Yes.
So that's it for today's session. Thank you to everyone who joined us, and thank you, David, and our special guest, Simon, for your insights and expertise. For any additional information and guidance, please contact your firm's ChMC Program Manager or a member of the ChMC team at chmc@managers.org.uk. A recording of the webinar will be made available for all those who registered for the event. Please do take a few minutes to let us know your thoughts by filling in the evaluation form. We've left the link in the chat for you. And thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.